I before E except after C. And yet, we still have some words like height, neighbor, foreign, and seas. Why is English spelling so weird?
I'm Kanani.
I'm Sabrina.
I'm Piper.
I'm Sean.
I'm Bonnie.
And we're the Lingua Francast.
With words like through that sound nothing like though, or bow, or words like knife and night with silent K, it seems like the rules of English spelling are constantly contradicting each other.
We can blame part of our problems on the French. James B. Carter's article, English Language Reform, attributes the spelling issues to the Norman scribes who applied Norman French spelling to the language of the Anglo-Saxons, and these speakings are still here today.
With the Norman French being a big factor to English spelling, English also adopted certain spellings because of words influenced from other languages, like Greek, Dutch, and an array of Germanic languages.
Even with these different influences to a language, the standardization of English spelling started with William Caxton and his introduction of the printing press in London. Being the first English printer, Caxton's spelling became the standard, also introducing Flemish spelling into the mix, with Collard Mansion, a Flemish calligrapher, helping Caxton out with printing.
And yes, because of that, attempts to try and reform spelling of the Anglo-Saxons language has been attempted since the Renaissance period. Scholars from the 1500s like Sir Thomas Smith, Richard Mulcaster, and John Hart all attempted to create rules and change spelling to better fit pronunciations.
Now, the 1500s were a while ago, and we've seen some differences in spelling, especially between the UK and the United States. Differences in spelling are apparent with the UK and US's spellings of words like color and labor, where the UK has an extra U while the US doesn't.
These changes to simplify the English language in the United States were started by Noah Webster, the pioneer of the dictionary. According to Christian Rowe of BBC, Webster sought to simplify American spellings by getting rid of double letters, silent letters, and other inefficiencies.
As you heard from Kanani, the concept of a spelling reform is not a new idea, and it is not unique to English. Turkey officially reformed their Arabic-infused alphabet to a Latin-based alphabet in 1928, a movement that started in the 1860s. China's century-long reform movement to simplify written characters finally took place in 1956.
That's really cool, but those reforms were kind of a long time ago. Do we have any modern-day examples?
Good point, Bonnie. Even recently, we've seen some spelling reforms take place. Brazilian Portuguese experienced reform not too long ago. For some background, the Portuguese Language Orthographic Agreement was created in 1990. Brazil, Portugal, Angola, Mozambique, Cape Verde, Guinea-Bissau, Sao Tome and Principe, and East Timor all signed this agreement following its creation.
The purpose of this agreement was to reform Brazilian Portuguese spelling into a simpler form that would be easier to translate and understand, both locally and globally. This simpler form added and removed letters, created rules for the use of hyphens, and other changes that would make the spelling easier. It wasn't until 2008 that the Brazilian government signed this agreement into a law to be enforced. After the ratification of this agreement, there would be something of a grace period, a transition period lasting 6 years.
The transition period would allow the use of the old and new spelling. As the 6 years passed, the new spelling became more integrated into daily life until that was all that was used by 2015. Although there were naturally some rough patches during the transition period, it has become a normal part of life.
Yeah, schools teach children the new spelling, translators translate using the reformed system, and so on and so forth.
You can read more about it in a great article by the United Language Group.
Wow, that is really recent and amazing.
Yep, reforms have taken place throughout history, and through lots of work, people make it happen.
Now, let's hear from some native English speakers to get their insight on an English spelling reform.
Sean and I actually interviewed several people to ask for their opinions on the English language reform. Who did you interview, Sean?
I interviewed a senior here at BYU. His name is Jeffrey Walsh, and he is a linguistics major. He has spent time studying several other languages and was able to compare their spellings to English. When asked if he ever gets confused by English spelling, he starts by saying, "My spelling definitely does get confused, probably because I've studied Romance languages, which are, majority of the time, very phonetic and can be spelled out rather easily just by sounding them out. When it comes to English, anything that's above 2 syllables now, I struggle. I mean, there are too many words that I used to be able to spell and would have zero clue. Like terrific. Does it have 2 R's? Does it have 2 F's? Does it end in C? K?
One of my interviewees said something similar. I interviewed Allison Linnell, a writing and English professor here at BYU. She expresses that she does find spelling issues. She states, "I feel like I guess on some things. Is it an S or a C? It is clear there are too many similar sounding or silent letters in English that people tend to mix up. Professor Linnell also says when grading papers, she has to use a spell check. She's still concerned if she's spelling things wrong, even as a writing professor. I then asked 5 BYU students around campus their opinions on English spelling and if they struggled with it. While the majority of people said they struggle with the word once every couple of days or once a week, 2 out of the 5 students expressed they struggled with multiple spellings daily. However, when I asked them if a spelling reform was feasible, all of them answered, including Professor Linnell, no.
Same with Jeffrey Walsh. He points out that there is so much written stuff out there already. It requires so much work, and I think people would probably place their effort in other areas before that. He raises the question, is putting our effort into a reform worth it when there's so many other issues with the language? And is the English language also permanent since there's so much writing out there already?
Very good point. Professor Linnell expresses with English, this is the way we've always done it. While the English language and spelling has changed a bunch over history, it does definitely seem that way, now that it's all recorded and written down. She also notes that English isn't all bad. There are definitely parts of spelling that are more difficult in other languages too. She uses Spanish as an example, and its masculine and feminine words. Everything that ends in an A is feminine, but I think dia is actually masculine. And so even with their system, for some reason, they break the rules, she points out. Every language has its own spelling issues.
And that goes back to how, like in English, different languages and the language's history influences spelling. Dia comes from a Latin word, which is masculine in Latin.
So it's not just English to blame.
Nope, but still, English spelling can be far-reaching. So going back to the original question, is an English spelling reform worth it?
A lot of English's spelling is considered unnatural, as stated by the interviewees. Jeffrey Walsh pointed out that in other Romantic languages, the spelling is much more phonetic. When you grow up learning English, you're always told to just sound things out and you'll be able to figure out the word. But this is difficult because the spelling is not always phonetic.
So if we reform the English spelling, it would be much easier to sound out words and be able to pronounce them. Therefore, people, and especially foreigners who are learning English as a second language, can learn how to say words much faster. It can get a bit confusing with pronouncing words for English language learners and can slow down the process of language learning.
English is already a global language, and it could become even more popular and connect even more of the world if it was easier to learn. However, as nice as it is to imagine a world where we can perfectly sound out English spelling and everyone can learn the language much faster, there are many issues with an English spelling reform making it far from feasible.
English as a language could develop and change for so many years because writing either didn't exist or wasn't so readily available. Once something is in writing, it almost becomes commercial, hard to take back. And now, in the age of the internet and the ability to print and mass-produce writings, it is nearly impossible to change it all. You would have to either recall everything ever written and rewrite it, or exist with both writing forms, which can get confusing. The two writing forms can get mixed up.
Not only that, but there are bigger issues to spend time on rather than editing an entire language. For example, languages that are going extinct. While English is already preserved, wouldn't it be more of a priority to preserve other languages as well?
In the end, a reform seems like a waste of time and resources, and overall, not that feasible. If we were to do a reform, how would we do it? Operation. Reform is a go. Here is the plan.
Step 1. Create a new and standardized way to spell words following a system in line with the goals of the Reformation. Produce an entire new dictionary covering the whole English lexicon with the desired alternative respelling. This will act as the backbone for the whole operation.
Step 2. Educational materials will need to be made to help teach the new language reform and give credibility to the movement. Additionally, these materials will be used in pilot programs to spread the movement to a wider audience and publish successful findings, leading us to
Step 3. Gain support from influential institutions. This task would be impossible without support from established organizations. We need to appeal to governments, media, and even big names in academia to garner full support in a full English reform.
Step 4. With all this support, we can now make this movement into a reality. With most communication occurring digitally, we will now engage with tech giants such as Google, Microsoft, Apple, and others to change their autocorrect and spell check features to follow the spelling outlined and created in Step 1. Additionally, we will talk with media companies to now utilize the reform in their official content and trending topics.
Step 5. Integrate the reform into pop culture. Movie subtitles, music lyrics, and even whole books need to be using the reform to reach the public more efficiently. When people are reading the reform and things that they enjoy, they will be more open to it, and may even need to adapt to it to continue enjoying what they love.
Step 6. Instill reform into the rising generation. In schools, teach the new way and penalize using the old way. If the next generations never know the Old English spelling, no transition would be necessary. Make the reform feel natural and the traditional spelling feel foreign and alien. With time, the reform will be all that is left.
Step 7. Official adoption of the reform. Now that the spelling reform is the norm, world governments may now use this new spelling in their legal documents, giving it a solid foundation to stay. With this step, the operation is complete.
But, of course, this is a dream. Every step has its obstacles. No reforms have been agreed on. Schools are resistant to change. Media outlets won't risk alienating their audience. Tech companies would not force people to change how they write. Readers will resist change in their pop culture spheres. Generational change takes a long time, and English isn't controlled by one government or body. Although nothing is impossible, this is pretty close. Regardless, the thought of an English spelling reform is a unique and interesting one, although it may be an impossible future given the improbabilities it would have to overcome. The benefits of increased literacy could be seen as worth the fight.
However, it looks like our strange spelling will persist into the foreseeable future.
Thank you for joining us at the Lingua Francast.
Bye!